Greetings, greetings, everyone. Hoping you all are doing great and well. Hello, 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 everyone. So, we hope you all are doing great and well. Thank you so much for joining us today for our ancestors' voices. We hope that you all are doing as best that you can be spiritually, mentally, physically, ideologically, in every aspect of any struggles that you are facing under capitalism. We hope that you are navigating those challenges as best you can with the support of loved ones, comrades, colleagues, organizers, fellow organizers, anyone who you feel you can, be able to be vulnerable with as we deal with the challenges and struggles of capitalism. We hope that you have that with you as you navigate through these difficult times. And we are thankful that you are here with us today, especially because there are several other things that you could be choosing to do with your time at this time. And so we're truly thankful. The All African People's Revolutionary Party is very humbled and grateful to do this broadcast every weekend because we understand that this is one of the steps that we need to take if we are to achieve one unified socialist Africa. That is our mission and our goal with our organization. And because we believe that Africa should be one unified socialist continent, that means we also understand that that means that we need land back. And so then that also means that we know that indigenous people need their land back. And that means that we know that Palestinian people need their land back. Anyone who is faced with the deficit of being colonized, Irish people, Asian descent people, name anyone who suffered from that. We, with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we understand that each and every one of us who has been displaced, kidnapped, or removed from their land deserves to have it back. And we're talking in more detail about just what the benefits are of having one's land. But we say that today because we want to continue to acknowledge that if you are anywhere from the very, very top grounds of Canada all the way down to Chile, then we acknowledge that this is still the indigenous people's land. That means if you fall anywhere in that and you are located, again, in the very, very top parts of Canada, any provinces in Canada, very down, very much down to South America and Chile, this is indigenous people's land. And so we have to start this African broadcast by acknowledging our indigenous comrades. And a lot of us still don't understand why that is. And we're happy to tell you that is the case because we understand that the indigenous people struggle. Not only do we support it, and we are very much in efforts of them getting what they need to get back so their land can be theirs, but we also are in support of it because we understand what that feels like. The difference is their land was taken from them, whereas we were taken from our land, right? But there's still that connection that draws there. And so, yes, we're very happy to acknowledge the indigenous people at our broadcasts because we have been to some indigenous people events and we understand that they are also acknowledging some of the struggles of African people at their events. And if you are in an organization that's working for justice, then you will start to understand that as you're going to the events that that organization is hosting, you're starting to learn more about the camaraderie. You're starting to learn more about the solidarity. You're starting to learn more about how we are unified and we are one and we are together because no struggle has been obsolete without the oppression of another group of people. That has been a consistent trend that we have seen around the world. And so, again, we acknowledge our Indigenous comrades today. We give honor and we thank them for allowing us to be in their space. And we hope that we will continue to acknowledge them even as the days progress and even into the new year, continuing to remember that this is their land, continuing to remember that they deserve to have their land back, and continuing to have as many conversations as possible with as many people as possible, helping other people understand this is not their land if they do not identify as indigenous. And so just helping to have those kind of conversations, I think is really going to help us get clear about what's happening here, because there are a lot of people who are confused. And so we like to use our platform to try to address some of that confusion specifically within our own community of people. And so I will start off by saying my name is not Ajamu. My name is Shukura. I am using Comrade Ajamu's Zoom account so that we can still be consistent and bring you all this seminar without any excuses, no matter what is going on. As our comrade Ajamu has mentioned, he is unable to join us today, but we are hoping that he is in good hands with the ancestors and the universe, and that all is well with him as he is continuing on his journey of organizing and working with us in the next week's broadcast. So he will be back with us next week. But we're thinking of him, we're lifting him up, honoring him, and anyone else who is in need of lifting right now. And so, because of that, I am grateful to hold this space tonight because I've been a member with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Going on February of 2024 will be 3 years that I've been in work study. But I grew up as a child in the Young Pioneers Institute, also known as YPI, which is a sub organization, or really a subcommittee, if you will, within the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And so much of the rhetoric that you hear us talking about weekly, I heard it every day as a child. My parents raised me to be very familiar with it and to accept it as a part of my life. And I think that has a great influence on me making the decision as an adult to be a part of this organization. And so we are humbled to bring our ancestors' voices to you today, as it is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. I keep mentioning the All African People's Revolutionary Party, or the acronym AAPRP. I've mentioned to you before that the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan Africanist political party based in Africa. And our objective is Pan Africanism, which is defined as one unified socialist Africa. Another way to think about this is to eradicate all the divisiveness and the separatist siloed culture that Africa is unfortunately being challenged with, and to help Africans, any part of the continent, understand that we are just trying to organize so that Africans can have control of the resources and the land. So we don't even insist that Africans choose to be a part of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We just ask that you join some organization that is working for justice. And that especially includes on the continent. The AAPRP is not the only organization that is working on the continent to make change. We've mentioned in previous seminars, you have the Pan African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, known as the PAIGC. We also have the Azapo organization, or the Azanian people of South Africa, and they're organizing. There are several organizations in Ghana. There's organizations that are being developed as we speak in Burkina Faso, including an AAPRP work study chapter, and the list goes on and on. So the point I'm making to you all today is that we are asking for Pan-Africanism because we want Africans everywhere. And that literally means anyone who descends from the continent. We want Africans everywhere, regardless of whether they were born in one part of the world or in Africa. We want them to understand that, as Kwame Nkrumah pointed out, any African anywhere belongs to the African nation. And we understand that that means that Africa is going to benefit from Pan-Africanism because we have to help connect what has been divided out and lost. That's what we're trying to do. That's why we're asking for Pan-Africanism, because we want Africans everywhere to understand, A, that they are African, excuse me, and to also understand that they have a responsibility to help change the conditions that Africa is suffering from. And so with that, I mentioned our comrade Kwame Nkrumah. This is one of the many books that this comrade wrote in his time when he was living on this earth. And we base a lot of the principles, if not all of them, off of this book that Nkrumah wrote, the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. This was literally a baseline and a organizational how-to structure manual, if you will, for us to follow, where Nkrumah literally left out breadcrumbs for us in this book of how to start an organization. And it's because of Nkrumah, it's because of several others who were able to start chapters all around the world that I can say that I am sitting here with you today on this broadcast, and that the All African People's Revolutionary Party exists because of Kwame Nkrumah, along with others who kind of paved the way and started this organization. So we are truly grateful for them. And as I said, this broadcast is usually hosted by Comrade Ajamu Umi, who is a longtime organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. He rounds up his time as being close to 40 years now that he's been organizing. So over 4 decades, which is pretty incredible. And as I said, I am celebrating my 3-year anniversary of being a part of work study. For those that don't know, work study is a subcomponent of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So I am working to get to a point where I can start to take on more responsibility and have what we would call a cadre status, or even pre-cadre status that then excels to cadre status. I'm not there yet. So I will just say, in the space of being a part of work study, which is a component that helps to organize with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And so I'm truly grateful, because work study has changed my life in many, many ways. In one way, by helping me to be more exposed to the writings of Kwame Nkrumah, Amilcar Cabral. We've read about Steve Biko, Thomas Sankara. I mean, we have several people that we've read on our list from this work study circle. And then being able to take what we read and applying it in terms of planning out events that we've hosted and whatnot. So it's been really humbling, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity. And so with that, let's get started talking about Cuba and the 65-year revolution, okay? So we start off tonight's broadcast by understanding that in 1953, on July 26th, there was a movement that was led by Fidel Castro. And this actual movement actually kind of insinuated an attack that would happen against the Moncada garrison in Santiago de Cuba. It's also important to mention that 5 years later, the Granma ship sunk. 11 combatants started this war from the mountains above Santiago. And so we should note that the Granma ship sunk, and 11 people were able to start a war because they survived from this sunking of the ship. And this also is important to think about, because when we think about urban strikes, we should understand that this particular war was able to support those urban strikes and even the shutdowns, because those shutdowns were led by Vilma Espin. I really am grateful for Vilma Espin, because I had a chance to read a lot more about this comrade in a book that they wrote with Fidel Castro, actually. And the Anti-Patriarchy Task Force is one of the committees that falls under the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And part of what we were trying to do with the Anti-Patriarchy Task Force, when I was more active and more strongly involved, was we wanted to update and renew the work study book lists. And part of that was we wanted to propose new book ideas, specifically by authors that were not male or were non-fem, were femme presenting or non-males or even non-binary folks. And we wanted to offer a chance for us to have more reading material that was more versatile, that was more diverse, and that was representing more voices that had not currently been heard by that older list that we were following. Vilma Espin wrote a book with Fidel Castro, and I am happy to say I believe it's on the list now. And so just thinking about how impactful this comrade has been really instrumental, because when we think about Vilma Espin, this comrade did so much to make sure that Cuba was in a position where it was continuing to have the power that it had. And also, she understood that we needed to take back the threats that were coming in with Cuba, especially because of the war that was happening. And so these urban strikes and shutdowns, they were organized by Vilma Espin, who created this network along with many others. And that's how the revolution was overthrown. The US had no choice but to be backed by the Batista regime, which took place in January of 1959. And so we can continue to think about how, when we think about 65 years of Cuba fighting back, this is what we're thinking about. For 65 years, the US has been trying so hard to take over and to destroy what Cuba has done, because it is literally not functional and not logical if you think about all the advancements that Cuba has made versus the US. And then you start to look at the resources, you start to look at the materials, you start to look at the populations, and you think to yourself, well, the US should have been had a cure for syphilis, and they should have been had a cure for HIV, if you really think about what's happening. But that is not the case, because the basic difference between the US and Cuba is people actually matter in Cuba. They actually matter. They're significant. Their lives matter. And they understand that their lives matter because they're operating out of a socialist regime, not a regime such as capitalism, where people are not as important as the money that comes in. And so these are some really big differences that we want to lay out, because that's going to help us kind of understand what's taking place when we really think about what's to come in terms of understanding this foundation. So again, on July 26th, 1953, this movement was initiated by Fidel Castro and many others, and that led to the attack that took place in the Moncada garrison, which is in Santiago de Cuba. And then 5 years later, the ship sunk, the Grandma ship sunk, and 11 folks were able to survive. And they started this guerrilla war from the mountains. And so, as I said before, Vilma Espin, along with many others, was able to create a network that kind of continued on what these 11 survivors had already started, so that we could still continue to push against any US threats, any US challenges that were taking place as it moved into January of 1959. Also, I should mention, I am not alone. I am with another living being who is dreaming right now. And so if you hear a little noise in the background, that's what that is. So, anywho, we're going to continue on. All right. So then we can talk, then we can talk about the US sabotage that took place in 1959, right? And so, as I mentioned to you in the previous slide, you had Vilma Espin and others who kind of created this network to push back and to resist the US trying really hard to take over and to destroy everything that Cuba had built, because they understood that in doing that, they wouldn't be able to stop the advancements that were taking place. So they were trying really hard to work on doing that. And sabotage is really the only thing that the US understands, because that's the only way to remain in control, right? And so what happened was there was too much sabotage that took place and to keep track of, but there were three things that stood out. So in 1961, the US military, invaded Playa del Giron, also known as the Bay of Pigs. And in 1962, there was an economic embargo that was put against Cuba. This is still in effect today. We have several solidarity sibling organizations that we are in cahoots with that do weekly seminars, or at least bi-weekly seminars, where they are constantly having actions against the embargo, trying to terminate it, and trying to raise awareness so that other people can understand A, what this embargo is about, and B, why it needs to be terminated and why it should not be existing anymore. The continued efforts to illegally overthrow the Cuban government have taken place, and we can count at least over 600 confirmed attempts of people trying to kill Fidel Castro. I should also mention, going back to the embargo for a second, when we think about the embargo, we should also think about how, again, like this is the point I'm trying to make, or this is the point that we're trying to make. Cuba has not had support, if you can call it that, from the US for several years since 1962, right? So we're going on roughly about, what is that, 61 years, if my math is right, almost 61 years or 60 years or so that Cuba has not had the support. And so when we think about what that really means, to me, that's how miraculous this is. That's how miraculous this really comes to be, because what you're really saying is you haven't had support for over 60 something years, but you still understand the importance of updating your curriculum. So children who are educated under the Cuban education system receive curriculum that is LGBTQ plus friendly and informative. Children in the education system in Cuba are having information being taught to them about patriarchy and about sexism. I already mentioned that they have eradicated the HIV transmission from parent to child, which is miraculous, because the US has such a serious problem with HIV. There's a whole day dedicated to it. December 1st is World AIDS Day. right? And when we think about the syphilis transmission, Cuba has been able to eradicate that as well. I also remember when the quarantine was fresh and we were in the month of March in 2020, Cuba had an antiviral treatment by that summer. They had something available either by June or July, I think, if not sooner. And Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson and Johnson, they would not have their first viral treatments ready to go until at least about a month and a year and 6 months later, if that. So just when we think about like what's happening, I remember doctors who were being educated in Cuba going to Zimbabwe. I remember them going to Liberia, taking this antiviral treatment with them. I was joining these seminars that I'm telling you about. And so I was able to learn and get more information. They had doctors going all around the world. They had doctors that went to Italy who were educated in Cuba, taking this antiviral treatment. And so, again, like, it's amazing how this embargo has really come back to shoot the US in the foot, because that could have really benefited several people on US soil who unfortunately died because there was no vaccine available and they were too ignorant or too stupid, or they just didn't know enough about Cuba and enough to understand that Cuba actually had an antiviral treatment that could have worked very well to address their sickness and to kind of preserve their lifespan a little bit. And so it's just interesting to me that you have this block where they have not been able to receive materials and things from the US, but they have literally been fine without. And so, like, but on the other hand, the US has set up this embargo and said, we don't want to have anything to do with you, but you still have a syphilis problem. You still have an HIV transmission problem. You still have homophobia that reeks throughout the education system. You have, people who are spitting out anti-critical race theory rhetoric. I mean, you have all these problems when it comes to white supremacy and homophobia and transphobia and xenophobia. And you also have several people that died that didn't need to die from COVID-19 because of an embargo that you set. But yet people think that the US is one of the most powerful countries in the world, but that remains to be seen. Because if you're so focused on making money, then that means that people in the US need to realize that we never mattered. We're insignificant. We don't matter now, because that's the problem with capitalism, right? That's always been the problem with capitalism. We just need to wake up and understand that that is the problem. Capitalism itself has never hid the fact that it puts money over people. It has never hid that. It has always been a system that protects private corporations to continue to make money while at the same time making other people suffer if they get in any way in the way of that money being made by that private corporation or entity. And so when we think more about what that looks like, we have to really think about what that has really meant. Because really what it comes down to is Cuba is a place that I cannot wait to go visit from a public health standpoint, but also just from a humanitarian standpoint. I cannot wait to visit. And we're going to talk in a moment about how much of an ally and solidarity position Cuba has been in with Africa in terms of helping us resist colonization, but also, like I said, sending over antiviral treatments, just being in solidarity, supporting us, giving us resources, materials. The list goes on and on. And so when we think about the development of socialism in Cuba, we could think about how Cuba has several socialist revolution tactics, and it goes like this. And so, when we think about the illiteracy rates in Cuba, they have completely destroyed illiteracy by 99%. So they're prioritizing the fact that people should be literate. They're prioritizing the fact that we should figure out ways to help people have stronger reading skills, reading comprehension, being able to function and being able to not only taking information, but being able to regurgitate it back, and then maybe even being able to teach that information to someone else, really as a way to prove that they understood what they read, right? Being able to impact their writing, because we know that writing and reading are connected, right? So being able to increase writing skills and being able to teach new languages through writing and being able to help people understand how to write, not just in Spanish, not just in English, but in other languages, right? Their healthcare is a right. It's free of charge. And this is always, I think, a really hard pill for people to swallow. I talk about Cuba all the time when I teach my students, because again, from a public health standpoint, Cuba is a great example, right? And so I'm talking about Cuba, and my students, whether they're undergrads or grads, they will say to me, is healthcare free in Cuba? And I'll say, yeah. And they'll say, no, I don't know if you heard my question. I just wanted to make sure. So healthcare is free? And then I'll say, yes. And then you can tell their brain is like the wheels are kind of needing some oil because they can't fathom that because capitalism has done a number on us. Capitalism has done a number on us and taught us that the only way for you to get something is by paying for it. And the more money you pay, supposedly, the better quality it's supposed to be, which we know is not the case. But that's neither here nor there. That's the propaganda that's being pushed. That's the propaganda that is being enforced. That's the propaganda that is being thrown down your throats to where you have no choice but to accept it, even though it's not true. Even though it's not true. And so when we think about how they destroyed illiteracy by 99%, they made healthcare free of charge. Education is free. You do not have to pay to be educated. You do not have to pay to be educated. I remember there was an organization out of Sacramento. I want to say it still exists today. It was called Birthright, I think, Sacramento Birthright. And it was ran by a couple of different people, but when I was there, I remember the director being Dr. Catherine Hall. And what Dr. Hall would do each year was organize a trip of biology pre-med students to travel to Cuba because she was hoping that they would tour the medical schools there, get more of an information about the programs and the specialties that the schools offered. And then if they were interested, they would set up room and board and allow the students to be educated there for free, even if they chose to come back to Sacramento afterwards. They did not have to stay there and be educated. They could go receive the education and go back to wherever their city or state or country was. Because at the end of the day, again, that's the thing about socialist Cuba is they don't want to just keep all the resources for themselves. They don't want to just keep all the benefits for themselves. They don't want to just have the zero transmission for syphilis and HIV for themselves. They want to share it with the world. They don't want anyone to suffer from syphilis. They don't want anyone to suffer from HIV. This is why they share the antiviral treatments because they didn't want COVID-19 to take over the way that it did. They didn't want all of those people to die. They were trying really hard to share it with as many people as they could. But this is the problem when we talk about capitalism because there's no money to be made if antiviral treatments are being passed out. That means that people don't need to have hospital stays. That means that people don't need prescriptions that are not really fixing their problem. And there's the money that's being made from the pharmaceutical companies, from the hospital intakes, from the inpatient intakes, all that stuff. And so this is where we need to really understand why capitalism needs to be stopped, you all, and why we need to not support it anymore because Cuba has never, ever, ever lost sight that people matter first. They have never lost sight of that. They have never lost sight of that. And thank the universe that they have not, because that means that they understand that people need to be literate. That's why they understand that because they haven't lost sight of it. They understand that we need to make healthcare and education free. They understand that they need to put a limit on housing expenses because you shouldn't have astronomical housing expenses because that can impact you being able to pay for you to maintain staying there. They understand that. That means that their shelterless population is impacted because they understand we need to figure out a way to make sure that the housing limit, the housing expenses are feasible for people to manage so that they can continue to make these payments on time. If they make these payments on time, they're less likely to end up on the street. Again, human centered, patient centered, whatever the term is, this is what that comes down to. And then having available jobs. That's a law abiding situation. You have to have available jobs. It's guaranteed by the law. And so these are just some different ways that we can think about how miraculous Cuba has been. We can also think about how there is international solidarity with Nicaragua, with Angola, with Azania, and dozens of other countries. International solidarity. So Nicaragua is in solidarity with Cuba, Angola, Azania. I mentioned to you all that there's a connection with Cuba as well as the African countries. Well, these are some examples of that, right? And so we can think about what that looks like in terms of having more of an understanding of how this solidarity goes back many, 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 many moons before I was born, before maybe some of you were even born. And so we're thankful and we're grateful. And this is why we have to protect that solidarity. We have to protect this relationship. This is why Africans need to increase their political education. Because if you are an African and you don't know how much Cuba has done for you, that's a serious problem. And it's a disadvantage. It's a serious problem and it's a disadvantage. I see that I'm freezing up, so I'm trying to slow down here a little bit so it can catch up a little bit. But just thinking about that in more detail, I asked my dad a couple of weeks ago, I said, why has Cuba been such a champion for us as African people? Why have they shown up for us so many times? What is it that they have felt drawn to help us with? And he said it's quite simple. You know, Fidel Castro understood that more than half of the population in Cuba was African. And so they wanted to make it their mission to do everything they could to support the continent and to address colonized countries within the continent that were suffering, to address, you know, lack of education, lack of healthcare, whatever that may look like, and finding other ways to support African people. So this is why they're sending medical doctors from Cuba over to other countries. This is why they're taking antiviral treatments, not just for COVID, but for other diseases that are coming up. They're in the process of working on a treatment of, excuse me, um, a cancer treatment. I'm trying to think of the name. A cancer cure. I just read an article about that the other day from a Cuban doctor who's working on that. And so these are just some different examples of that. But again, they're not just sitting on these resources; they're sharing them with anyone who's interested in receiving them because they understand that no one should have cancer, not just people in Cuba, but no one should have it. And so we just have to really like acknowledge how lucky and fortunate we are, you all, that there are some humane people in the world who, first of all, believe in socialism. And second of all, we have people like Fidel Castro, we have people like Vilma Espin. Not only did they believe in it, but they have made it their life mission to impact people globally all over the world so that none of us have to suffer at the hands of lack of education, at the hands of lack of healthcare, at the hands of being oppressed. We shouldn't have to suffer. As I prepare to move to the next slide, I just want to highlight, this is one of my favorite pictures. I've talked to a couple of comrades about this photo in a previous seminar. So I know this means a lot to other comrades too, but I just love how, you know, you have the African standing there and then you have Ernesto Che Guevara standing there and he's holding this African baby. And I think the photo is so cute because you can tell this baby is very comfortable. He knows that he's literally in good hands. And when we think about Ernesto Che Guevara, we should really like just take a moment to thank this comrade for all the work that they have done for Africa as well. So in case you don't know, we have done seminars on Ernesto Che Guevara already. But in case you haven't seen any of those, I'll just quickly give you a walk down memory lane for some, for others that might be informing you for the first time. But Ernesto Che Guevara, this picture was taken in the Congo in 1964. And so using the code name Tantu, which means two in Swahili, Che and Cuba's efforts in the Congo set the stage for an intense Cuba support for the African liberation. So again, this is a great example of Cuba helping the Congo to resist and to fight colonization that was trying to take place. They were trying to thwart them and overcome the Congo. And this is a great example with the help of Ernesto Che Guevara and others using the code name Tantu, they were able to fight off those issues and to resist so that Cuba could then come in and support the Congo achieving African liberation. And so these are just some examples, as I mentioned to you, not only about how Cuba has continued to show up for us and have our back, but also how you have other comrades of indigenous descent who have shown up and fought for Africa to achieve liberation and to maintain that liberation and independence. That's what the key of this is about. And so if we continue to think about the advancements that socialism has brought socialist Cuba, we can think about how even the World Health Organization, now I try not to give them too much credit because the World Health Organization is a joke, if you ask me. Again, everything is based off of capitalism, but even the World Health Organization, if you see value in them, then you'll know that World Health Organization, calls Cuba's healthcare the on earth, the best on earth. they call it. It is the best, you all. It is ranked #1 on earth. Okay? I don't know if you're hearing me right now. I didn't say in a indigenous country. I said on earth. Okay? That means out of all of the places that exist on planet Earth, Cuba's healthcare is the best. That's what WHO has said time and time again. The United Nations calls Cuba's education system one of the best among the world. One of the best among the world. And then the International Monetary Fund calls Cuba's socialist economy the most promising for development. The most promising. And so these are just some different facts that we can think about. And again, how cool is it that Cuba understands that the children who are being educated should be taught about LGBTQ plus identifications. They should be taught about, using proper pronouns, respecting space, respecting what that looks like, asking for consent, but also this piece about talking about patriarchy, having conversations about that, having conversations around sexism. I mean, I think that is incredible. And I think that if more children had the kind of exposure to that, I think it would not only give them the tools that they needed to better navigate the world as adults, but I think there would be less trauma. I also think there would be a lot of more healthy relationships because I think people would not see the need to abuse and to manipulate because they would have had a stronger foundation of understanding how problematic those systems of oppression are. And so just, props to Cuba for understanding, hey, we need to talk to our children about this. We need to talk to them about this as young as they can be so that we can start to have a conversation and a foundation for it and normalize it. Normalize it. That's my favorite part, where it's not a big deal. Let's normalize it and just talk about it as if we were talking about going to the grocery store, right? Because it's not a big deal to go to the grocery store. This is just something that people do. And so just having these kind of conversations, I think that really plays a part in it. I still can't get over the free education. I mean, I'm just really, really grateful for these opportunities. And I hope that more and more students listening to the seminar, but even those who have done their own research, I hope they'll consider, if they don't have the funding, maybe they can consider going to Cuba. It might behoove them to do that. And like I said, what I love about Cuba's education system is they don't expect you to stay there once you've graduated. They understand that you might want to go back to your city, town, or country and take back the information you've learned so that you can impact the health there too, which is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. Because we don't want to just keep all the health for one country in Cuba. We want to spread it everywhere. That's the true definition of public health, right? And so these are just some different ways that we can think about that. I will highlight for you that this photo you see on your right is actually the Cuban National Assembly, the legislator, if you would, and they met this year sometime. And so this is an example of different folks coming together. We have folks, I'm sure, because I mentioned the solidarity with Angola, Azania, Nicaragua. So I'm sure you had representatives from there that were there in addition to the other countries that Cuba is in alliance with. And so these are just some different ways that we can think about how progressive this country has been, but also why we need to protect this country. Because if something happens and if Cuba gets impacted in a way where their education system needs to now have a fee attached to it, that's going to be extremely problematic. Excuse me, if something happens where they can't put a casing on housing fees, that's going to be impactful, and people are going to have more issues where they might start to have higher shelterless populations of unhoused people. And if something happens with healthcare, that's going to be really it's going to impact people in a very dramatic way because people are not going to be able to maintain all the health issues that they have if they suddenly have to start paying for things, especially if they had not been already paying for things. For us to say something like that in the US, that's not an abnormal statement because some of us pay for health insurance every day. And if you don't pay individually, maybe you get it provided through your employer, but you still have to pay at some point. Maybe it's a premium, maybe it's a deductible, maybe it's something. So to be able to have a world where you live in where you don't have to pay for health insurance, you would not want to start suddenly having to pay because that's the whole purpose of socialism, is to put people first and to make sure that the resources are equitably working for everyone. Again, like from a healthcare standpoint, You would want all people to be able to access preventative care, to be able to access, what x-rays or treatment options or, appointments they need so that they can catch things early on. That's where all of that comes into play, because the earlier you can catch it, the earlier it can be detected. If it can be detected early, then that means you don't have to worry about it progressing. If it progresses, then you're probably going to have to spend some money, because now it's a lot larger of a problem for you to deal with. And so again, I feel a personal investment to want to protect Cuba as much as possible, because I want to see a world where we can get free healthcare for everyone. I want to see a world where we can get free education for everyone. And if not in the whole world, we can at least start with Africa. We can at least start with Africa. As an African person, I can at least take responsibility for that and say that I would like very much to see that as a Pan-Africanist frame of one unified socialist Africa, providing free healthcare, providing free education, providing a housing cap so that people don't have to worry about the fees of their housing going up too high, and also for providing opportunities where jobs need to be provided by law. I mean, how cool is that? You don't have to worry about job insecurity. I mean, that's such a beautiful thing to be able to have that kind of comfort and stability. And for a lot of us, we know nothing about that, because unemployment has been kind of a roving wave that people have been experiencing, especially if they live in the US. So these are just some things to think about in terms of how we can really learn a lot from Cuba, but more than that, we can learn a lot from the beauty of socialism. That's really what I think we're trying to get to today, is helping more of us understand that socialism is not the enemy. And we've talked before about how, we've done seminars on socialism. We've done seminars on why we want to have a one unified socialist Africa. We've done seminars on Cuba before and their socialism techniques. So we're not going to go into detail about that today, but I will say, if you still have hesitancies of, not trusting socialism, or maybe you've been taught that it's a bad thing or whatever that looks like, you should really unpack why that is. Because 9 times out of 10, that's not you having those beliefs. That's propaganda and capitalist media telling you what to think. That's what that is. Because if you really think about socialism, you can name some drawbacks. Sure, everything has drawbacks. In the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we learn that everything is dialectical, which means there are pluses and minuses to everything. So, sure, socialism has some drawbacks, but I guarantee you capitalism has more. I guarantee you it does. And I guarantee you that socialism has more benefits than capitalism does. Just like capitalism has more drawbacks than socialism does, I guarantee you socialism has more benefits than capitalism does. Because again, you're putting people first. You're existing in a world where we can give equitable respect to each human being, along with the responsibility and the expectation that everyone needs to contribute something so that we can manage the economic and the emotional and the educational flow of our environment together, because we're all bringing something to the table, quite literally, whether it is working as a sanitation worker, or whether it's working as a barber. Maybe it's working as a dog groomer. I don't have the skills to cut someone's hair, nor do I have the skills to cut an animal's fur. But if you have the skills to do that, then we expect you to bring those skills to this space so that we can continue to manage and navigate this world without being overturned by a colonized country that wants to take over. This is what that looks like. If Cuba were to become a colonized country, they would not be in a position to offer free education. They would not be in a position to offer free healthcare. So again, these 65 years plus, that's because we've been trying to protect the sanctity of what Cuba has offered, not just Cubans, but the world. So it is every single one of our responsibilities to protect Cuba, to show up for Cuba. This is why you should have conversations about socialism. This is why you should have conversations about socialist Cuba, specifically with people who are ignorant and they know nothing. This is why. Because the propaganda in the media is teaching them that this is a horrible place and you should never want to go there because people are enslaved and they're forced to do blah, blah, blah. When really, that's not the reality. This is where that comes from. I also love talking to students about socialist Cuba, because I ask them, if you think about the layers, if you will, the levels, the hierarchies, if you will, you think about the different stages. And so we move from capitalism to socialism with the intent to end with communism. And a lot of people don't understand communism has yet to happen. So it's always amazing to me when people say communism doesn't work. And then I say, how do you know? Because we've never seen it. And then they say, well, how do you know we haven't seen it? To which I would reply, because I have read several books about communism by Kwame Nkrumah under work study with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So my political education is higher, and I can now have a conversation about it because I understand it very well. So then I would respond and say, well, communism is a system where there is no class divide. So if your class is a different class than my class, meaning you're in a higher bracket because you make more money, maybe you're a medical doctor and maybe I am a hairstylist. Well, obviously, a medical doctor is probably going to make more money than a hairstylist, right? So even at my highest day where I had 18 people in my chair, you would still make more money than me. And so when we think about it, that means that the more money you make, more value is assigned to that, which is why people who are doctors, when they tell people I'm a doctor, people go, oh, because there's a higher class associated with it. There's a higher value associated with it. There's a higher social capital and social acceptance affiliated with you saying, I'm a doctor versus you saying I'm a hairstylist. There's a higher class to it. It's very different. So in communism, there's no class division, none whatsoever, none whatsoever. Which means we don't care if you make more money than the other person because those kind of divisions don't exist anymore. There's some type of medium, if you will, where we understand that medical doctors are just as important as hairstylists because not everybody wants to do their hair and some people enjoy paying someone to do their own hair. So this is where we start to have these conversations where we're seeing the value of what each of us brings and we're asking people to contribute based on their skill sets, but also based on the fact that if you're good at this skill and I'm not good at it, but I need you to provide this skill, then I'm in a position where I can still benefit because you're providing it. If you have a dog that needs to be groomed and you don't know how to shave your dog, then you're going to be grateful that somebody else says, yeah, I have 15 years of experience grooming dogs. Thankfully, you're in a position where you can take your dog to be groomed by them, right? And so communism has never happened because unfortunately, in every single system that we have discussed, including socialism, class divide still exists. Now, with socialism, it's starting to exist a little bit less because as I said, socialism is one step before communism. So you certainly have less class divide in socialism than you do in capitalism. But the point remains that we're still trying to help people understand that part of eradicating class divide is changing the ideology around how we assign value to people based on how much money they make. That's what this boils down to. And so when we think about that in more context, we can understand quite clearly how important that is and why we should try to reach a communist society one day. We should try to reach that. That would be really beneficial for us if we did. It would impact a lot of us in a different way, and it would allow us to stop looking at one another as dollar signs and to actually start looking at each other as human beings who have contributing factors, who are existing because they matter, and we exist because we matter, excuse me, and allowing us to really start to think about what respect looks like from a very different lens. That's what that boils down to. So, as I prepare to close, the last slide before I get to the concluding slide is really kind of discussing how imperialism and capitalism are continuing to work to terminate the successes that Cuba has completed. And so, again, like we all have a responsibility to protect all the work that Cuba has done, all the work that they are doing, all the work that they will do, because their work benefits you and me. Trust and believe that. Trust and believe that. And so when we think about why imperialism won't stop, we can think about how, as early as the 1950s to today, the US continues to destroy the Cuban Revolution. Like I said, that's bad business for the US to charge for healthcare and to charge for education. Meanwhile, American students can go to Cuba and get free education. That's bad business. That's bad business. And when you think about competing, when you think about businesses who are competing, the US is in competition with Cuba because they don't offer free education in the same realm that they do. They might offer, financial aid or some things like that, but certainly not at the level and caliber that Cuba is. If that were the case, there would be more students choosing to achieve education in the US. And as a matter of fact, numbers have gone down. In every institution, the enrollment numbers have gone down. Why do you think that is? Because tuition is too freaking expensive. That's why. Tuition is too freaking expensive. I'm taking one unit right now. One unit, you all. Just one unit for my dissertation, and it's $758. One unit, not 15, not three. One unit is $758. That's a lot of money. So yes, I do have financial aid because I don't have $758 twice a year in fall and in spring semester. And a lot of people don't have those options. And so, like I'm saying, the US is in serious trouble because more and more students are going to start to learn how beneficial Cuba is for them. And they're going to start traveling other places to get educated. When I was first looking at graduate programs, I was definitely thinking of leaving the US. That was automatically the first thing I was going to do because I wanted to have a different experience. And so more people are going to start to take a page out of that book because tuition is still rising and we can't afford to go to school the way we used to. It's just not the same. And so, like I said, the US is trying to tear down the Cuban Revolution because it's bad business and it makes them look bad. They're also trying to do this because they don't want people to have a desire in the US of seeing how beneficial socialism has been. They don't want that. They want you to instead to think about how capitalism can still be more beneficial to you. So they're giving you propaganda to teach you that capitalism is not a bad system. They're giving you propaganda to teach you that socialism is a bad system and that communism is a bad system. But if you really increase your political education, because hopefully you are joining an organization that's working for justice as one of your New Year's resolutions, or maybe it's just a goal that you have, or maybe you've already joined an organization that is working for justice, then you're in a better position where you can see for yourself because hopefully your organization that's working for justice has some type of political education element where you can start to read about different ancestors and comrades who have written about why we need to increase our ideologies. They have written about why we need to be more educated because we don't know what we don't know. And we live in a world where good information is hidden and lies and mistruths are provided to you 24/7, 365, right? So we have to think about ways to navigate and manage ourselves through the lies and the mistruths to find the truth that is hidden. That's what that looks like for us. And so the US doesn't want you to see how beneficial socialism can be. They don't want you to see how beneficial socialist development can be. And that means that that would really be the key if we really understood, if all of us, I should say, really understood how beneficial socialism development was, then that would be the key in us understanding how it would solve thousands of problems that millions of people in the US and in other parts of the world are suffering from every day. As I just pointed out, if we had a chance to have free healthcare in the US, that would be astronomically a good thing for so many people because they're already struggling to make ends meet. They also can't afford their medical bills. I personally was thinking about canceling my insurance with the Affordable Care Act because they want me to pay $500 a month. A month. And I'm seriously contemplating, can you afford that? I don't think you can. But I also need health insurance. And my institution does not provide health insurance for graduate students because we're not considered to be full time and we're not considered to be important enough to have health insurance because that's capitalism, right? We're insignificant. We don't matter. I don't make enough money where the institution thinks that I deserve health insurance. And when I worked as a graduate teaching assistant, I was working enough hours where I definitely earned it, but they didn't see that I qualified. So that's one of the things that grad students have been fighting for is to get health insurance for free. And that's going to be an uphill battle for us because Tennessee is not a state where it values those kind of things. And so when we think more about what all of this looks like in the grand scheme of things, we have to understand why we need to protect Cuba. We need to protect the revolution. We need to protect the accomplishments that they have made. We need to protect the people who are leaving Cuba every day and traveling around the world trying to impact people from an educational standpoint, from a healthcare standpoint, impacting people every day with the information that they have taken from Cuba and sharing that information. Again, how lucky are we that this has been our reality? So, as we prepare to close, you all, please make sure that you scan the QR codes that you see. So in the upper right corner, we have the QR code that'll take you to all of our All African People's Revolutionary Party Day broadcasts and programs. Everything that we are offering, from Spotify playlists to, or Spotify podcasts, I should say, to other seminars that are taking place throughout the week and at different times on different days. All of that information can be found by scanning this QR at the top right corner, excuse me, top left corner. And then we also have our Comrade Hood Communist Organization. They have their Telegram information that is on that QR that you can find. And then, of course, Comrade Ajamu, his website, www.abetterworld.me. His website can be found as well with that QR code. I want to remind anyone who is African. So again, Nkrumah says any African belongs to the African nation. So if you descend from Africa, I don't care if you were born in Sacramento, Memphis, Miami. I don't care if you were born in Waterloo, Canada. I don't care if you were born in British Columbia. I don't care if you were born in Haiti. I don't care if you were born in Japan. If you descend from Africa and you would like to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, this is our website below. We would love to have you join the website by clicking on the link and indicating your interest. And we'd be happy to affiliate you with the region closest to where you're located, the chapter closest to your region, so that you can get connected and join the work study process, which is the first step. I also want to remind folks that if you are not African, we still would encourage you to join an organization that is working for justice, or you can reach out to us if you need some ideas on organizations that you think might better align with your background because you don't identify as African. I also want to share that my work study circle last week got an email from one of our comrades who said that they were not in a position to continue with work study at this time. And I responded all, I replied all and said, I really appreciate you so-and-so for reaching out and saying this. We thank you for that. We understand that the All African People's Revolutionary Party may not be what's best for you right now. And we do hope that when your situation changes, that you can rejoin us. And then I said, comma, we also want you to still join some organization that is working for justice. And I would share that with you all tonight here, or today, or tomorrow, whichever time it is for you where you're viewing this. Even if you decide that the All African People's Revolutionary Party is not the organization for you, that is okay. We still expect you to join some organization that is working for justice. We believe that if you join some organization, any organization that is working for justice, we still have a better chance of aligning our values, connecting with that other organization, and working more closely to resist, to fight, to eradicate, to terminate, to destroy capitalism, imperialism, and any other systems of oppression that are hindering, impacting, and making it very difficult for Africa to thrive and succeed on, a non-oppressive classist division basis. And so we are working very hard with other organizations. I mentioned to you that we have connections with organizations on the continent, whether it's the Azanian People's Organization, the Azapo Organization, or maybe it's the Independent Party for Guinea-Bissau, the PAIGC. We have several other organizations that are not even African that we are affiliated with. The American Indian Movement, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, students, Palestinian Students Justice for Palestine, all these different organizations that we are working with constantly navigation with, Gabriella, the Filipinx organization. I mean, the list goes on and on. So even if you're not African and you need some suggestions of organizations that you could potentially join, reach out to us. You can reach out to abetterworld.me and we'd be happy to get you that information. We have even helped Europeans organize. So if you are interested in organizing and you're European, we can even help you with that. My dad and I were working on setting up a work study circle for a group of Europeans out on the East Coast. My point is, join an organization that's working for justice because we need you all. We need you all. We need you all. We're about to bring in another year, and hopefully that means with good health and prosperity. But capitalism is still thriving, you all. Now it's slowly deteriorating, but we have a responsibility to terminate it as much as possible, to eradicate it, to neutralize the threat. And so we have to take everything we got to do that. And that means organizing and being with other people in an organization where we can organize with them. It also means increasing our political education because we have to be humble enough to understand that we don't have all the tools ideologically that we need yet to do this. I don't know about you, but I don't know how to end capitalism yet. That's why I'm still trying to read so I can grow and learn. There is so much more that I need to learn. So part of that is joining an organization that's working for justice, but the other part is understanding that you don't know enough information right now and humbling yourself so that you can learn it. I know that I am at time, so I'll just say really quickly, please make sure you come back and join us next week on Sunday. Comrade Ajamu on Sunday, January 7th, will be talking to us about his time in Ghana, Africa, and going home. So we'll be able to hear from him as he reports back from being at home. I know he's sad that he is leaving. I also want to remind you, if you haven't checked out his book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, please make sure you check that out. It is $8 on Amazon. I want to say that's the hardback price. And I think if you get an electronic version, it's like $6 or something. So definitely check that out. And then last but not least, don't forget to support our comrades in Burkina Faso. They are still raising money so that our African children can have correct political education resources. So we're raising money for books that are Pan-Africanist driven. So please make sure you scan this QR code to support us. Thank you all so much for being with us. If you celebrate the new year, I hope you are safe and you enjoy yourself. Happy New Year. If you don't celebrate it, I hope you have a great day and a beautiful wishings to you. May you be well spiritually, ideologically, mentally, physically, in all forms. May you be as healthy as you can be because we need you to take down capitalism with us. Okay, so we need you to be well rested. We need you to be nourished, hydrated, all the things because you're going to need all your energy to take this system down. Okay. All right, you all. Peace. Be well. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.